Hey Colts fans, I'm JJ Stankevitz and welcome into another episode of the Colts Show, an Indianapolis Colts podcast. We are presented by our friends at Microsoft Surface Copilot Plus PC. Please remember to rate, review, and subscribe to Indianapolis Colts podcast wherever you get your podcast, and subscribe to us on YouTube as well. Awesome episode today. I'm here at Radio Row at the NFL Combine right now. We taped all this last week, but coming up on today's episode, I had a chance to catch up with ESPN's Dan Graziano, Yahoo Sports' Nate Tice, and ESPN's Benjamin Solak. Sort of a free agency preview, if you will, but trying to zoom out on some topics, some trends around the league, especially with Nate and Benjamin, who are two of the smartest folks who talk about football for a living. Really good stuff coming up here. A lot of intel on Daniel Jones, on Alec Pierce. Obviously, we're taping this last week, so if you're listening to this or watching this right now, you might already know what happened with those two guys. But we're kind of going off of what Chris Ballard said last week, which is that the Colts want to keep those two guys around. We'll see how that may happen this week if it hasn't happened already. But for purposes of this episode, again, we don't know what is exactly going to happen with those two guys. Again, you may know by now. All right, with that, let's get to Dan Graziano to start the episode here on the Colts Show. It is my pleasure to be joined here on the Colts Show by ESPN's Dan Graziano. You can catch Dan on Get Up on NFL Live across ESPN's programming. Dan, thanks for joining us here.
Oh, my pleasure.
So we're recording this on Wednesday of last week, whenever this goes out. So we were talking before coming on. Yeah. We're gonna have to talk around Daniel Jones and Alec Pierce, because right now, as we're recording this, we don't know the answers on that. By the time our listeners and viewers watch this, we might have answers.
Yeah, because we'll be right up against the franchise.
Right up against the tag deadline.
Right, so they'll have a sense coming out of here, what to do. We would have to sign one of those guys, franchise the other, sign them both, whatever, yeah.
So Chris Ballard talks a lot on Tuesday of this week about how he wants to get something done with both those guys. Sure. He wants to retain them. Within this market, what do you think retaining these guys, and why is it important for the Colts? We should probably start here. Why is it important for the Colts to retain Daniel Jones and Alec Pierce?
Because it worked. I mean, right when Daniel was healthy, first half of last year, they were among the very best teams in the whole league. And so knowing that it works, everything that Chris Ballard has gone through with quarterback over the last, 7 years? Running in veterans for a year at a time, all that kind of stuff. We haven't seen it work as well as it did on offense as we did first half of 2025 with Daniel Jones. So Daniel's still young, and, they like him. Obviously, the receivers, he has good rapport with those guys. The offense made sense. So in an offseason where there doesn't seem to be much in the draft in the way of clear-cut answers, and the free agent market, if Daniel is not on it, gets pretty thin after, Malik Willis.
Right.
Knowing you have something that works, I think that makes sense for the Colts to try and keep it together. So the question is, what form does that take? And as you mentioned, we might know more by the time people are watching, listening to this.
You've obviously been pretty connected to the Giants over the course of your career. With Daniel specifically, was there a point last year where you went from being like, I don't know if this is sustainable, to being like, no, this is real? Yeah. Did you hit that point?
Oh, for sure. And I think, what you saw week in, week out was, I think you have a very good offensive coach in Shane Steichen, who, the best offensive play callers, coaches right now are the ones that, can find the quarterback that fits, maximize his strengths, minimize his weaknesses. A clinic in Seattle this year, right, with Sam Darnold and Clint Kubiak, and he gets a head coach job out of that. So I think that's what was going on. Also, you had a healthy Jonathan Taylor running well, which is going to help anybody. And over the past couple years prior to 25, the quarterbacks in Indy hadn't necessarily been able to count on that. So it was all working very well together, and it was believable. And then, unfortunately, what happened to Daniel last year is what has happened multiple times in his career, which is he got hurt.
I want to go back to you talk about Shane a little bit. Mm-hmm. That coach-quarterback connection, how hard is that to find in the league? And because you look at even some teams that have that great elite quarterback, if they don't have that connection where the coach is on the same page,
sure.
Is that how you get Sean McDermott losing his job, John Harbaugh leaves the Ravens? Mm-hmm. When you have that, it seems to elevate the level of the quarterback to potentially beyond what people maybe expected from it.
I mean, I think that's probably the two most important positions in your organization is coach and quarterback. And if the head coach is the offensive coordinator as well, as is the case here, it's even more important. So How hard is it to find? It depends on the open-mindedness of the coach and the organization. I think Shane Steichen is the kind of guy that's going to be like, look, I'd love to have Patrick Mahomes, right? But
Right.
not everybody can.
Yeah.
So what do we have? What's good about him? What can we do with him that can help us score points? And I think the good creative coaches. I mean, look at a case like Malik Willis, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like Green Bay picks him up as a backup, a flyer. He ends up having to start pretty much right away because Jordan Love got hurt in Week 1 last year.
We saw it in Week 2 of the 2024 season, and he was fantastic.
You watch a guy that looks like a different guy than he was in Tennessee, and that's because Matt LaFleur and his staff went, well, here's what's good. Like, here's what we can do with him. Here's what he does well. Here's what he likes. Let's build it around that. And you see guys really take to it. The Darnold example is one. Baker Mayfield in Tampa. I mean,
Right.
they're all over the league right now, and I think that's a testament to the open-mindedness and creativity of some of these offensive coaches.
I think that for years it felt like teams are chasing the next Mahomes,
Sure.
chasing the next Allen,
Right.
Jackson, those guys. But those are one-on-one type players.
Right.
Chasing that middle ground of you've got a good quarterback, maybe not an elite quarterback, but you've got that quarterback to pair with the head coach. You talked about it. That's exactly what got Seattle. I mean, their
Yes.
defense too,
Of course.
certainly. But that's what got Seattle to the point where they could go to the Super Bowl. And, Darnold down the stretch of that NFC Championship made some nails throws that clearly were the product of that relationship and that elevation.
He was sensational. There were times when he wasn't. I mean, he wasn't his best in the Super
Right.
Bowl, but they have the right kind of team. So the trick there is you didn't spend $55 million a year to get
Right.
Sam Darnold, right? So you're not in the position that Miami is in,
Mm-hmm.
right? So you get him for $33 million a year. That means you can build your great defense. You can build your offense out around him. So yeah, I think that's the point, right? Like, you'd love to have Patrick Mahomes, Joe Burrow, Josh Allen. Like, human cloning technology has not reached the point where we're going to get to 32 of those guys. So what do you do? And I think Seattle is, every year the team that wins the Super Bowl is the example of everything. But in truth, like, Seattle is, they put their money where their mouth is. Russell Wilson came to them about a contract. He wanted more than they thought he was worth. They traded him. They went to Geno Smith about a contract last year. He wanted more than they thought it was worth. They traded him. Like, they're not going to just do it because you're supposed to. They really believe, like, we don't want to pay the very good quarterback, great quarterback money, because that hurts our ability to build a team around him. So if you're the Colts, bringing it back to Daniel Jones, that's, what's the number that works? I don't think Daniel's going to get $50+ million a year, nor I don't know that he should. But if you're franchising him, you're almost there anyway. So is it transition tag? So these are the conversations
Right.
that we've been having at this point.
With Alec Pierce, his market, it seems like it is just like, and I don't know if this is real or not, it seems like it's just kind of grown and grown and grown over the last couple of months as maybe people have realized, like, oh my God, this guy's a really good player. He had the most efficient receiving season since Mike Williams in 2019 in terms of catches and yards. Why is his market where it is right now as we're sitting here on Wednesday, February 25th?
Because everyone's chasing explosive plays, and he's led the league in yards per catch 2 years in a row,
Yep.
right? So you got a guy that averages 21, 22 yards a catch, and you've seen him, and he can get open, and he's got the speed and all that. Like, people look at that and say he's still young. He's coming off a very good year, but maybe he's capable of even more than that. And you have that explosive play ability. Talk to offensive coordinators, they're trying to find as many of those as possible. Talk to defensive coordinators, they're obsessed with stopping them. Like, that is really what the league is about right now, the ability to score and score quickly. And Alec Pierce is a guy that represents an ability to do that, and I think that's what we've seen when he's been on the field the last couple of years.
All right, I want to get you out of here on this. The Colts, the whole plan for this team is to kind of replicate that first 10 games of last season. If we get to this point next year at the Combine, you're sitting here at this table with us, and we're talking about, hey, it worked. This might seem obvious based on the discussion we've just had, but why would it have worked? Why would that plan have worked a year from now?
I mean, the simple answer is probably Daniel Jones stayed healthy. He had a fully healthy season in New York first year under Brian Daboll that helped him get a big contract last time around, and they went to the playoffs, went to the second round of the playoffs. So when he's been on the field, he's been a pretty good player. He had turnover issues early in his career, but those have, in fact, gotten better, regardless of how a reputation sticks to someone. So I would say health, because we have seen it work. I also think, big picture Colts. I mean, the defense, there needs to be work done there. They've talked openly about the need to get faster at certain positions on that side of the ball, so they have to do that. But if they can keep the offensive core together, if the offensive line can play well again, if Jonathan Taylor can stay healthy again, you know this is a team that can score points. So if you get Daniel Jones and Alec Pierce back, and it's the group you want to go forward with on offense, and then you find pieces for Lou Anarumo on the other side of the ball. Yeah, I think it's it wasn't a hot month. I mean, it was a couple. Like they were deep into the season.
There's proof of concept there.
Right. Yeah. And they weren't playing, the schedule the Patriots played. Like, I mean, they were so they were beating real teams. So, yeah, I think it's, that's the key. And it's overly simplified, and it could probably be said for any team in the league. But, yeah, probably health.
Right on. Dan, thanks for joining me here. We'll look for your stuff on NFL Live, on Get Up, and on ESPN.com. Appreciate the time.
Appreciate it.
All right, back here on the Colts Show, it is my pleasure to be joined from the Football 301 podcast on Yahoo, Nate Tice. Nate, how you doing, man?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to talk about. I'm glad you already mentioned them, though. But talk about some Colts players because Colts have a weird inkling of always taking guys I'm fond of in the draft process. So it's kind of
well. You have a history of liking like big athletic guys.
Yes,
and that's kind of where the Colts go with that.
It's a traits league.
I want to ask you about just kind of like overall trends around the league and kind of where the Colts fit in those. One of the biggest trends that came out of 2025 was this trend toward teams using 3 tight ends. Yeah. And the Colts did some of it with Tyler Warren, Mo Alley-Cox, and Drew Ogletree. The Rams kind of pushed it forward with their guys. Explain to our listeners, our fans, our viewers, like why teams have figured out that putting 3 tight ends on the field at the same time is something they want to do and has made it successful for certain offenses.
Originally, or the original line of thinking of that is that you're trying to get a defense to match you with their base personnel.
So 3 linebackers.
3 linebackers, 4 DBs, really looking at how many DBs are on the field. And so in the broadest terms, it's base or sub, and sub includes nickel, dime, anything else, sub packages. And so that is just the typical line of thinking. But defenses have been more and more comfortable playing with light bodies. And so you don't really get that dare of the simple of, oh, they match them with base, throw the ball. Oh, they match with sub, run the ball. It's gotten a little more complicated than that. But what you still get when you get 3 tight ends on the field because of the formations you typically do with them or the planned formations or assumed formations is defenses are a lot simpler. They still do stuff. They still blitz. They still do all those things. But the packages aren't as deep because of just you don't play that against a bunch. We play a lot more against 3 receivers, so we're going to have more plays against 3 receivers. So that is what you're kind of doing. It's kind of a game theory type of thinking where it's like I want to get the opponent to be doing something they're not comfortable with. Even if they might be good at it, they just don't do it a lot.
Right.
So that's really what it is. So like what the Rams do, and McVay is usually on the trend of all this or ahead of the curve of all this, is doing the 3 tight end stuff. It's not just always getting into burly ball, run it down their throat formations. If you watch the games against the Seahawks, they're spreading them out from 3 tight end looks.
Right.
And then chucking the ball down the field. And that's, again, what you're doing because then they are guaranteeing the quarterback, hey, against this look, this coverage. All right, so, again, talk about game theory stuff. But, like, if I go 3 tight ends, all right, I know the defense is going to play maybe one of these 4 coverages. And then we get into this formation, that spread formation. And I can guarantee you they have a check. And they guarantee them that they get to this one coverage. And if you have Matthew Stafford, who has 200 starts, that's very nice to have. And that's why they can attack those ways. And so that's just one example, but that's why offenses want to do it, because you're just trying to limit the menu for the defenses and to get the advantage there.
So thinking about the personnel you need to do that, it's easy to say we're going to put 3 tight ends on the field, but you need specific kinds of tight ends.
Correct.
Do you need a sort of like a skeleton key tight end, like a Tyler Warren, who can do everything, who can block, who can run routes? And then do you need like a blocking tight end and a receiving tight end? Do you need 2 blocking tight ends? Like, because this is going to inform, I think, potentially what we're thinking about with Colts free agency, where Mo Alley-Cox and Drew Ogletree, 2 blocking forward tight ends, are free agents. So within that, like, what sort of personnel do you need to successfully operate this?
I would say you prefer to have the blocker to actually open it all up.
Okay.
And it's not just those multi-tight end looks. That's just overall with an offense. And I also think it's just that the receiving tight end is easier to find in theory than a guy that can truly block from in line. I know the Colts have a couple, but most teams have none.
Right.
Some team like the Rams have 4 tight ends on their roster. Like Higbee's always been just like a kind of a solid blocker, but they got Colby Parkinson, who's a plus blocker. If you look at the Seahawks, who did a couple tight end stuff, they have A.J. Barner that can unlock some stuff. Those guys are more of what opens it up for everybody else, and those guys are getting valued a little bit more. You look at Josh Oliver, got paid last year for the Vikings. John Bates got paid by Washington last year. Even the Bills for a reason went to Jackson Hawes, who's their 5th round pick, and they moved away from jumbo tight end because they were like, well, now we got this guy and he can do it. And that was an issue that the Bills have run into is they had Dawson Knox and Dalton Kincaid. Neither are great in line as blockers. So even though they had 2 tight ends, defenses are like, might as well be receivers.
Right.
We don't have to.
They're not going to play base to that at all.
Correct.
Yeah.
Ever. And so that's why they're okay. What if we put an offensive lineman out there? Well, then and it was great, but then we have limitations of what we could do from there. So then they got a true Y tight end, a blocking tight end, a Jackson Hawes, and it was like, oh, now everything else opens up from that. So to me, if you are going to kind of lean this way, it's becoming more valued amongst coaches like that or in teams. Like you see guys getting paid, and I think guys are trying to find it. And this tight end class actually has some interesting names as well.
Yeah,
too.
This is where I kind of wanted to pick your brain on this because this is something I've been interested in. I think our fans here are probably a little more interested in the next thing I'm going to ask you, which is about Alec Pierce.
Yeah.
And when this episode comes out, it's coming out on Tuesday, March 3rd. So we'll probably have an idea of what the Colts are going to do or have done with Alec by then. And I asked this to ESPN's Dan Graziano, but why is Alec Pierce such a valuable player within not just the Colts offense, but within, if you dropped him into any NFL offense, why would he be such a valuable player?
It's the name of the game and the name of the NFL right now is explosive plays. And you need a quarterback or an offense that can generate them throwing the ball. You need receivers that can take the top off and truly take the top off and come down with the football. And now to me, I'm starting to value running backs that have more home run speed and maybe not even it's me. I've been weighing this for all offseason. I'm starting to me. And I love Jonathan Taylor. He might be an ideal running back for me. To me, an ideal running back is a guy that maybe is a 4.55 guy, but 4.6 guy, maybe not the fastest, but just efficient, gets singles and doubles, as I always call it, efficient kind of runner. But to me, I'm starting to skew to guys that I will weigh the vision a little less and weigh the explosiveness a little more.
Okay.
Call it the Kenneth Walker.
Yeah, right.
But it's because defenses are so good tackling, playing top down now, that you can get 4 or 5 yard gains a little bit easier, in theory, now. But you need the guys that can take 15, 20 yards. Luckily, the Colts have a guy that can do both, so they don't have to worry about it. But there's other teams that have to worry about this. But this brings us back to Alec Pierce, is you see guys last year like Tutu Atwell getting paid, Tyquan Thornton getting to the Chiefs. MVS was on multiple teams just because of a simple skill set of he could block and he could take the top off. And he wasn't even very good at it, and he was still getting paid and teams trying to get him. Rashid Shaheed is super valuable for the Seahawks, especially if you have to get traded for. But Pierce, to me, is not only just that he's fast, he's also huge. And so it's not like a Tutu Atwell who's 5'9", 160. He is a basketball player, a volleyball player. He has that skill set. And so many offenses are craving for explosive plays. And you can draw them up and you can say, well, yeah, we're going to attack deep. You need the guy that's still a valid threat. Otherwise, defenses are just going to go, all right, fine. He's never getting the ball, so I don't have to worry about him. And if you have defenses, especially safeties now, that have to play top down, have to play 2 ways, now you're getting their eyeballs to somewhere else other than the run. You're getting their eyeballs somewhere else other than the high-low that's happening over the middle field.
Right.
So it's an opener for everybody else. And Pierce is only one of a few guys in the league that's truly like this. And that's why I think he's getting so valued. And that's why so many other teams or fans of other teams are like, oh, we're going to sign him. And I mean, he's going to make a lot of money. But I think that's why the Colts are like, yeah, well, we're trying to keep him here too.
When I looked up a couple of numbers on this, Pierce led the NFL in targets of 15-plus yards downfield. He had 61 last year. And then if you look at some of the efficiency numbers or even just the total numbers, it's like Alec Pierce, Puka Nacua, Jackson Smith and Jigba are all in that in terms of the downfield stuff, in terms of the outside the numbers throws, where that's where you have to create explosives now because of the way teams are playing with this too high world that we're in. So having that guy who can unlock the explosives downfield, but then it also, the way that Alec fits within this Colts offense, you have the safety who now might have to cheat over a little bit. You have a guy who can control the middle of the field in Tyler Warren. And those 2 guys specifically work so well together that it feels like if you cannot have Alec Pierce in that offense, it does limit then potentially what you're able to do with a guy like Warren, with a guy
Yep.
like Michael Pittman,
Yep.
Josh Downs, those other guys.
Everything becomes tighter.
Yeah.
Like it just the whole everything just feels tight and that's a great example just even using Downs too. Yeah, but Downs and Warren, they operate over the middle. And if you have a guy that's a valid threat on the outside, a valid speed threat, how defenses play you, they might run more cloud, more cover 2 to that side. And again, making defense more simplistic, but also opening up opportunities elsewhere. So that, again, it's just a boost effect that these types of guys have. And I think Pierce has just earned the right to, like, get paid like this because his game has improved. He's not just a one-trick pony now. He's got, like, maybe 2 tricks. Yeah. But, like, he can actually run more of the route tree now. And it's actually because everyone's scared of his speed. And also, like, deep ball receiving or deep big plays is more of a receiver stat than a quarterback stat. It's not like Patrick Mahomes forgot how to throw the deep ball.
Right.
It's just he doesn't have Tyreek Hill. He's throwing a friggin' Tyquan Thornton now.
Well, Daniel Jones had
Was
the
terrible at
reputation.
deep ball.
Right.
Yes.
He had
And
that
now-
reputation, and he
Yes.
comes to the Colts, and all of a sudden Alec Pierce goes and has
this
shocking incredibly efficient season.
Oh, yeah. And then even a guy, Riley Leonard, who is a guy I was high in the draft, but then his biggest blemish was how was his deep ball?
3 plays into the Texans game. There
Throw
it is.
down, unpin the grenade, and launches it. And it's like, and Pierce beat the defense so bad on that play, he was able to wait for it, and still there's nobody within like 5 yards of him. So again, there's stuff that you draw on paper. Oh yeah, this is going to work, but then you need the guys to actually make it come alive. And Pierce not only makes it come alive, he adds more to it, and that's what good players do. Like a team that always comes to mind to me that, and it's funny because Matt Harmon over here, who I do Football 3 with, we talk about this all the time with the Cardinals, because it's just like one of these teams that it's just they're funny to us. But their receiving room has a lot of big, good players, but they don't have any deep ball guys. And so it made everything feel tight. And so, like, yeah.
Well, that's like Michael Pittman Jr.,
yes,
who's a big guy, but he's not necessarily that down the field, vertical outside the numbers ball winner.
No.
He's over the middle, he's a ball
exactly.
winner.
And
Yeah.
crossing routes and
Right,
everything. Like
yeah.
when Gardner Minshew was the quarterback with the Colts, it's like that's Pittman on those RPOs,
Oh, yeah.
breaking in, and that's his skill set. Like they might all be built the same, they might time similarly, but like how these guys win is all in different ways. So how they can be used on the X's and O's kind of just opens everything else up.
What stands out to you about the way Shane Steichen has kind of built these different offenses in the 3 years he's been the head coach? You mentioned Gardner, that RPO heavy attack. Last year with Anthony, or in 2024 with Anthony, it was run heavy, chuck it deep, and then last year with Daniel, it was to me it was putting a lot on Jones to make the right check at the line to get the Colts into the right play, and then within that play, he was going to have someone just wide, open on those plays.
Yeah.
What stands out to you about Shane and the way he kind of operates things?
Because he has some Norv Turner to him. I've always been fond of what Shane runs because it's just like, to me, it's sound and it's just good football. I want to say it was the Rams game, and there's a couple plays in that where he hit Daniel Jones hit like a sail route, which is like a deep corner route from the slot to Warren, and on the design of it, it was just like perfect. I knew why he ran it. Like that's the thing. Maybe that's a compliment I could give Shane Steichen is I always understand why they run things. Like I'm always like, oh yeah, I understand that design. I understand why you got to that. Sometimes Anthony would maybe not execute it, and then I'd be like, what happened there? But now you get Daniel in there, and you see a trigger man. I think maybe that's the best way I can put it. Because the ball kept going to the right spot, and that's more of a thing to Steichen. I think that how Steichen wants to design football plays is exactly what you want in the NFL right now, because he wants to attack down the field, and if you attack down the field, opens things up, then you run the ball. I thought Tony Sperano Jr., I believe, was the offensive line coach. I thought the O-line for at least most of this year played great. I thought they had good game plans, and I thought the run game was complementary to what they were trying to do passing-wise. So it's just good game planning, and I think his core concepts, which is a lot of downfield stuff, is just always going to be valid. I thought the Gardner Minshew offense was probably the most atypical of a Shane Steichen offense, as opposed to which is funny because that was the first year,
right?
If I'm right. But it was cool because, all right, you see teams, all right, we're going to run a bunch of RPOs. We're going to spam the same run play with it. They would get into formations, especially in the red zone, and do like 5 different versions of RPOs. So it's the same formation, same run, but they just tagged it one thing differently.
Right.
And again, that sounds so simple. It's like, okay, anyone can do that. But it's like, then why doesn't everyone do it? And I always just thought that was like, that takes thoughtfulness. That takes like, hey, we have to, all right, if we're going to live in this world, we have to have a menu. So maybe that's a good way to put Steichen. So he can always build a menu off of the guys. I've always just really liked what Shane Steichen has done, whether it was in Philly or now in Indianapolis, because again, it just makes sense to me.
You can tell me if this doesn't make sense or does make sense, but it's something I've thought about. The Shanahan-McVay tree has been so picked over.
Yeah.
Like the proliferation of that around the league, it's hard to find those guys now. And defenses have adapted to that scheme now that has kind of become the trend in the league. Is having a coach who doesn't come from that tree. I mean, I think about Ben Johnson in Chicago, who does not come from that tree, kind of comes in the Sean Payton tree, is having a coach who comes from the Norv Turner tree, who's good at it, by the way. Is that an advantage that teams could have in building out an offense to combat some of these defenses that are potentially built to stop the Shanahan-McVay scheme?
Yes, because this is, again, I think Sean Payton, Ben Johnson offense, and I'll include Steichen with this. It's almost like, it's kind of Air Coryell, but it's like, to me, it's traditional NFL offense. That's how I picture it. And Shanahan, to me, is the newer. It's funny how these things change and when you've been around it for a while. But I think my short answer is that this is where the advantage is to attack this way. Because how they don't run a lot of quick game. I know we just talked about the RPO stuff. That's a different kind of thing. But how they attack, everything's downfield, how they use chips, how they use checkdowns, how their play action concepts are just slightly different than Shanahan stuff. And like the Shanahan offense lived off bootlegs. But then defenses adapted and started teeing off on bootlegs. All right, well, okay, so we don't go away from that. So we're going to do half roll, now play action stuff. Well, that's what Norv Turner or Shane Steichen do anyway. So it's kind of like, because that's the meta, was that the Shanahan offenses, so you're going to adapt to the meta. Defenses are. You look at how McDonald played with Seattle, how Jesse Minter was with the Chargers, some of these really good coordinators, you can tell they are trying to stop outside zone. That's why they play two high safeties. Then you get to add an additional defender to defend those runs. But the Norv Turner way, the Sean Payton way, they prefer duo. They prefer at-you runs, and then they prefer the play-action concepts off of those at-you runs. And that's what's funny is McVay, who's a Shanahan guy, runs more basically Sean Payton, Norv Turner stuff than he probably runs Shanahan stuff these days. Because defenses are lighter. They're the front set just physically lighter. And also offenses are getting bigger, and it's just a physics thing. But these offenses, what their fastballs are, what their kind of staples are, it just matches to what defenses are doing nowadays. It's kind of, very NFL is almost like 2006-ish right now with the scheme, which is pretty funny.
The thing I was thinking about was, in the mid-10s, the trend was the kind of Hawk 3. Cover a ton of cover 3. And then the Shanahan-McVay scheme kind of evolved to shred it and break their rules. And then you had this sort of, I remember I used to cover the Bears, and that 2018 Sunday Night Football game where Vic Fangio came in, they picked off Jared Goff 4 times. And I had this running bit with Vic that year where, does defense really matter? And after that game, he comes into his press conference and looks at me and goes, hey, I think defense matters. But then you had this scheme that kind of adapted to stop that scheme. And now that too-high scheme is sort of the way things are right now, and now you have these other schemes that are coming in to try to stop that. It's so interesting, just this evolution and how you wind up on the cutting edge of something.
And a year later, you're like...
And a year later, and it's like, well, okay, now they adapted to stop that.
Next page. And these defenses that want to live in a quarter shell, and they rotate from that. It's not that they always end up in cover 4, but how they just are based out of. They are, especially like the Seahawks, they are so aggressive and so top down and so in tune with how offenses want to attack them, that the way to beat them is you got to, I say, lean into the punch like a boxer. I got to stand there and throw it deep. And it's like, it's not always going to work. You can see for the Patriots, they couldn't even block it. So you couldn't, that's the thing, you have to block it too. We got to get that discussion too. That's what also the Ben Johnson, Sean Payton, and Norv Turner trees do as well, is they put more onus on the quarterback to sort some stuff out.
Yes.
While the Shanahan guys, they put it all in the center.
And that's where Daniel Jones succeeded in sorting that stuff out.
Because now he knows. It's like he's confirming in his brain.
Right.
And I've been in both worlds. To me, I like to have the center get everything set, and then the quarterback can put the trump card. That's how I've just preferred football, but you need a quarterback that you can trust to do that. You hopefully a Duke grad that's played a lot of games. You're like, if it's not you, no. But that is another thing, is that defenses got really good at making these offenses throw hot. The Shanahan offenses just go, well, you don't have to worry about sorting it out. You just have to find the hot if you feel heated up. And, well, if you watch the 49ers Chiefs Super Bowl, the second one, Spags knew that and just kept blitzing them and making Purdy throw hot. And they teed off on them on some big plays. So I think that sorting, and my dad, who was a long-time offensive line coach, that's what he would always say. He's like, we sort it out, and then we gash them. Once in a while, they'll gash us, but that's hey, they get the 1 sack, and we hopefully get 4 explosives off of it, and then they get out of those looks. So like even that's another thing that, not maybe where offense this has always been around, but maybe that's what it is too. Is just letting the quarterbacks have that final trump card, taking oh God, we can go longer and longer on this, but this is also the why you don't want a motion, because you can't sort things out with the motion and everything, because that becomes a balance, and the Shanahan guys love a lot of motion, so that becomes part of it. But it's one of those things too where I'm curious if more teams start putting more on the quarterback to, hey, just have the final check on some stuff, because there's only a handful that do it right now, and I'm curious to see this next generation kind of get that capability. All
right, before I get you out here, Nate, I do want to ask you about Sauce Gardner, because we here in Indy saw like a game or 2 of him.
Yeah.
This is a guy who became the highest paid cornerback in the NFL last summer. And everyone was just kind of like, that makes sense. What about his play style unlocks certain ways defenses can play? And you know what Lou Anarumo likes to do. Like, what do you think a whole year of Sauce can do for a Lou Anarumo defense?
True lockdown stuff where you can, like Lou Anarumo, why he's Lou Anarumo, why he kind of got some respect when he was with the Bengals, especially, was that the late down stuff. So 3rd and 4th down looks, his game plan stuff. Like him in the playoffs is like, it's a sight to behold, because it's like he's up there with one of the better game planners, game planning coaches out there. So when you get a guy like Sauce that can legit hold up one-on-one over and over again, then you can get into the funky stuff. Then you can get into exotic looks. Then you can play. I can go into man coverage if I want to throw man coverage out there. I can do quarters or cover 3, but I can just not have to worry about shading anything to his side. If you want to get to funkier looks, you can kind of use him in funkier looks as well. So that's what a lockdown corner does, and he is one of those guys. He got paid for a reason. He's kind of, to me, one of the upper echelon. Him, Derek Stingley, PS2. And why am I blanking on the 4th? There's a 4th guy there, and I know his name.
Devon Witherspoon?
Well, Spoon's pretty good, too. Yeah. No, God, there's kind of like, so PS2. No, I want to do this. Stingley. Did I say Stingley? So Sauce, PS2, Stingley, and there's one more now I'm blanking. Oh, Quinyon Mitchell.
Quinyon Mitchell.
Yeah,
okay.
there's another one. But he, to me, is in that tier. So it was called top 5. There's not a lot of guys that can. You're going to get beat every once in a while, but there's not a lot of guys that can do what he does for 60 snaps. And they
like 90 snaps in the case of the Chiefs game.
Yeah, the Colts have desperately needed a corner. Like the flashes of Juju Brents, it was like that wasn't enough. But like the Colts have needed a real dude there, and I understood, especially how the AFC was last year. I understood, hey, taking a shot, especially how things were going for Indianapolis at the time. And after that was Murphy's Law, and it's just like the NFL's a cruel mistress.
Yeah.
But there's not a lot of guys out there. Like I'm just struggling to name upper echelon guys right now. There's a lot of tier 2 guys, but Sauce is one of the rare kind of tier 1 corners, and so that's why he gets paid like that. That's why he gets traded like that, because there's only so many guys that can do this.
Right on. All right, Nate Tice from the Football 301 podcast, a Yahoo podcast. I'm a loyal listener of it. I appreciate the Simpsons references that you sprinkle in there, but also great way to learn more about football and the trends around the NFL and how things are working around the league. Nate Tice, thank you for joining me here on the podcast. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
It is my pleasure to be joined here on the Colts Show by Benjamin Solak from ESPN. Benjamin, thanks for the time, man.
Absolutely. Good to be here.
So this episode's coming out March 3rd. So we'll have some answers on Colts free agents by then.
Yep.
Potentially Daniel Jones, Alec Pierce. I've asked this question to a couple of people, but let's start with Alec Pierce.
Yeah.
Why is he such a valuable football player in the year 2026? What about his profile, the way he plays, would make his market be as robust as I think some people think it could be?
He's so good, dude. I love him so much.
Well, that's an easy
I
answer.
loved him out of Cincinnati. So he led the league in yards per target, yards per reception, and in explosive receptions rate, right?
Yep.
All because he led the league in air yards per target. Among high-volume receivers, there's nobody who gets targeted more down the field than Alec Pierce does. Now, when we think about downfield receivers, very often we are thinking about Deshaun Jackson's, right? Where it's like, okay, you're getting a ton of speed, but you're paying for it in terms of size. And so these are players who can be moved off the line of scrimmage. They can be bullied. They can't block in the running games. They're limited usage. Alec Pierce is huge, and he blocks, and he's high effort, right? And so it is a lot harder to remove him structurally defensively, and you have to do less offensively to scheme around him, right? So he gives you explosive play without giving you the cost that like a Tutu Atwell loses for you, where he has this downfield ability. He also now, he's done this for multiple seasons. This is the thing about Pierce that's driving me crazy. Everyone's like, man, this 2025. Man, in 2024 he was leading the league in yards per target, yards per reception, air yards per target. The offense and passing game in general was not as good, and so the overall production was not as good. But for multiple years now, Pierce has been a high-volume player, right? He does not leave the field. He's impactful in the running game, who creates highly explosive plays down the field. He does it with speed. He also does it with the ball tracking, with the elevation, because he's strong. He's got the volleyball background. He's got unbelievably strong hands. Like, this is, in the modern NFL where we chase explosives, this is the dude. There's a question about, can he run, some more routes? He had a very limited route tree with the Colts that I think will affect some teams, but in general, this is a guy that teams are going to covet for sure.
But it's that outside-the-numbers vertical ball-winning ability that in today's NFL, where you're playing these two high shells and everything's getting rotated and, you don't know what you're looking at, if you've got a guy who can just go one-on-one, win on the outside deep, that is how you can consistently create explosives in a way that you can't necessarily scheme it up. It's just like, go chuck it up to Alec. He's going to go make a play.
Yep, and he has that ability outside the numbers, above the rim. It's contested, but also a lot of his production, if you see, they're in these condensed sets, and he's able to get, leverage on a corner. He's got inside leverage, and he just runs that post down the field. And that's the thing. Like, people don't talk about Pierce this way because Alec Pierce is a white boy, but he runs a true 4.4, right? Like, he was a 4.41 out of Cincinnati, right? And then he's got a 40-inch vert. Like, this is not a, Mike Evans trot down the field and box out guy. No, he will run by you. And a lot of corners have experienced him running by them because they don't respect the speed and the elevation ability. And so he is the full menu you could ask for from a downfield threat receiver. He runs these in-breaking routes, right? He was used more on digs this year, and that's a big part of his menu. If we could, Alec Pierce is to me, I believe this very strongly. He's 90% of a Nico Collins, 90% of a George Pickens in terms of that caliber player. He needs to run more slants. He needs to run more quick breaking stuff, the 3rd and 4 stuff that just they never asked of him because they had Pittman and they had Downs. If you knew he could do that, he'd already be banged. That caliber player, like $25 million per year sort of contract like Nico got. And I think he's still going to get that because teams are going to assume that they can get him there.
I mean, one of my favorite catches he had all year was the 3rd and 6 against Denver, where he was up on Surtain, gets inside leverage. He runs away from Surtain across the field. Daniel Jones hits him on a 7-yard gain, picks up a first down. It sets up the chaos that was the end of that football game. But he could do that. He has the ability to run those routes crisply and get himself open enough to make a play.
I think he had 7 targets on slant routes this year, which for a player who doesn't leave the field like he does is truly an absurdly low number. But it's just when you have Pittman, you have Downs, you have 2 of the best quick breaking route players in football. You just don't need him to do that. Yeah.
Let's talk about Daniel Jones. What was give me a difference between 2022 Daniel Jones and the way that the offense was designed for Daniel Jones in 22 versus 2025 Daniel Jones? Because I think whatever the contract looks like for him, if it gets done with the Colts, which, again, maybe it has by now, people are going to look back and say, well, the Giants erred in giving him that contract in 2022. What's different about Daniel Jones in 2025 that maybe lends itself to more sustainability over the course of whatever contract he winds up getting?
He throws the ball more aggressively, right? I mean, 2022 is a lot of RPO, it was a lot of quarterback run. It was a lot of, we're going to try to be a little bit more mistake-free. And then when we throw the football, it's just like one-on-one alert, and we're going to throw it, for 50-50 opportunities and for these downfield verticals. The Colts and Steichen really immediately got him able to throw the dig between layers of coverage, right? Throw the post over the top of safeties, which it's not like Jones was a particularly high interception player in the past, so it's not like he was afraid of throwing into coverage, but he just, I feel like, really wanted to see it first and wanted it to be open, or wanted it to be the only option on a play, whereas with the Colts, he was just oh, no, I shoot, right? I'm an aggressive quarterback. I push the football. I attack the windows and zones in a way that we hadn't seen from him with the Giants. So whatever it was that unlocked him there, what that allows you to do is it allows you to have 7 play scoring drives instead of 11 play scoring drives. And that means that for a guy who is going to take some sacks and is going to fumble the football when he takes some sacks, you don't need to have perfect plays for 11 plays in order to get the ball down the field. You can actually do it a little bit faster. So it protects Jones from the worst version of himself, because while he probably will always be a high sack rate quarterback, if you can pay that off with more explosive gains, then you can still get quick scoring drives and put points on the board fast. So those sacks aren't nearly as debilitating when they actually do come to pass.
One thing I looked at was between the numbers on intermediate throws. In 2022 with the Giants, he threw 5 picks and had 1 touchdown.
They didn't do it, yeah.
With the Colts in 2025, he threw 5 touchdowns and 1 pick.
Yep. I mean, the Brian Dable offense when they first arrived was extremely collegiate. It was very... We spread, we go RP out, and we throw stuff out breaking because it's away from leverage, it's away from the linebackers. We can just read one guy. If he steps in, we throw it out breaking. If he steps out, we hand the football off. It was very, very use the 53 and a third. Whereas Shane was basically just like, no, like I run my stuff, right? Like we're going to, get routes flying down the field. We're going to get guys in the midfield. We're going to get crossing patterns, and we're going to be willing to throw those things. It was much more so big boy throws relative to what he did with the Giants.
I brought this up to Nate Tice on this podcast
Love
too.
him,
But,
big fan.
well, obviously.
Cool guy.
Yeah, cool guy. The proliferation of the McVay, Shanahan, Kubiak, we'll put it under the Kubiak umbrella, the proliferation of that scheme around the league has led defenses to work to stop that scheme specifically. It's kind of like when there was the Hawk 3 and then the Kubiak system comes in to try to break that system, which it then did. The Colts don't have a guy off of that Kubiak tree. They have a guy under a completely different umbrella with Norv Turner. You saw the success that like the Lions had and then the Bears had with Ben Johnson, who comes from the Sean Payton tree, a different tree. Is there value in having a guy in Shane Steichen who comes from a different tree, and he's got to be good at it? It can't just be like any old guy. But having a guy who's successful, who is a good offensive mind coming from a different tree with the way the league has trended toward playing defenses.
100% unbelievably yes, right? Especially because we're not in year 2 of McVay Shanahan, we're year 9 of McVay Shanahan. So the fruits of the tree now are, several branches, past, right? You're not hiring Matt LaFleur and Kevin O'Connell anymore. You're hiring Mike LaFleur, right? Which that's like an unnecessary dig at Mike, and I apologize, Mike. But it's the sense of, we've already picked some of the best fruits off this tree, some of the most closely related guys to the original DNA of the offense. Now we're kind of getting the offensive coordinator who was the offensive coordinator who was the offensive coordinator 4 generations removed. Also, because the McVay Shanahan system is not just so proliferated, but is so obvious in terms of what it does, is it's very easy to graft some of that stuff. You were talking about intermediate middle. A lot of how Shane throws intermediate middle is stuff that we would call McVay Shanahan stuff, right? That one of the things they do best is throw into that area of the field. It's not inherent to them. It doesn't belong to them. They're not the guys who invented it, but they really popularized how to use under center play action, how to use pre-snap motion to really leverage those spots open. That's not hard stuff to graft into your system and go. And so when you have a guy who wasn't born into the system but can take some of the best stuff from the system, put it into his offense, he brings a different perspective to it, a different thought to it, and so the tendencies aren't nearly as there. Like the first thing that comes to mind when you ask that question is how Shanahan at times runs into big pass protection problems because his rules are pretty well known right now by the defensive coordinators who like to blitz and like to send pressure. They know how to get old guy on the back, get a one-on-one in some of these drop back situations. Well, Shane just the language for protections, let alone how they teach protections, is completely different than Kyle's, right? Coming from the West Coast versus coming from North. Like, it's just going to be called something different in the playbook, but it's also going to be a whole different philosophy to it. So you might be running some Kyle and McVay stuff, but if you're protecting it different, it's going to be harder for the Brian Flores's and the Mike McDonald's of the world who have, solved a lot of those protections to be like, oh, shoot, this is how we would usually get after this when we were playing Kyle, when we were playing Sean, but we can't do it against Shane because he protects it a little bit different. So 100%. The way that we oftentimes default, right? Like this draft cycle, this head coaching cycle, the moment it opened up, who's everybody? Oh, we're all going to hire Nate Shieldhouse from the Rams. It's like, okay, I'm sure he's awesome, but are we going to do this again? There are other really good offensive coaches from other systems, and having one who, like you say, is legitimately good is an advantage for sure.
So what do you like about the way Shane Steichen and Daniel Jones kind of bonded together last year?
I think Shane's spectacular. I think he's so good. I think there are very few guys in the league who sequence plays the way that Shane does and calls plays situationally the way that Shane does. Shane just always has every game he walks in with 3 or 4 third and long calls that are just sick. They always open up. I don't know, and you don't know from the outside what it is. How does he know what the coverage is going to be? How do they know they want to target? But just it's very clear him. And then I would say you have to target your Jim Bob Cooters and your Cam Turners and your passing game coordinator's name I can't remember.
Alex Tanney.
Thank you. Because that's clearly a staff effort, right? That's the sort of thing that gets done collectively as a group, but they always have really great situational calls. And then, like I said, in terms of packaging plays, going back to even the Philly days, Shane was so good at just I call this base play, I call this base play, I call this base play, and having the exact feel for when, okay, now I call the change up because now they're going to overreact. It's one of the things that's made McVay so very good in his career, and Shane to me has something very, very similar. The other thing I said about Daniel was the fact that he was more aggressive. And I think that one of the big challenges and big successes of our current quarterback coach landscape is you have a lot of these reclamation projects. You have a lot of these guys who are coming and had a big contract, they didn't have a big contract, they were unsuccessful at their last spot. And you have to figure out how to get that guy to be confident in his own ability without being too aggressive, right? You have to be able to say, hey, run the offense. If you throw a pick, you're not going to lose your job. If you take a sack, you're not going to get benched. But, don't be reckless out here. We still need to, still going to be more of a point guard for us as opposed to like the Patrick Mahomes and the Josh Allens of the world. And he, with Daniel, immediately, bang, got it, right? Like that's something that like the Bucks and Baker are still figuring out, in terms of like how much do you let the Bronco buck, how much you just kind of like quarterback this offense. Daniel immediately walked in, knew where his bread was buttered, knew when it was time to, uncork a big throw, knew when it was time to say, hey, Jonathan Taylor, like go win the game 28 times. Like Shane's such a good manager of the game in terms of the plays that he calls and how he calls them, the timeouts that he calls. Like, I think Shane's got the goods. I really do.
Thinking about Baker and Darnold, those are guys who Baker has had a new offensive coordinator every year he's been in Tampa. Darnold will have a new offensive coordinator now in Seattle. What's the benefit of Daniel Jones and Shane Steichen, assuming that something gets done with Daniel, continuing that partnership and being able to build on it in a way that maybe some of these other reclamation projects have not been able to do?
So it's hugely beneficial. You always want continuity. You want continuity of language. You want continuity with your center and with your offensive line for the sake of protections, for your receivers. Everything is good. You do have to make sure you stay on the cutting edge,
right?
And you always want to be having new offensive ideas come in, right? One of the things you've seen from Indianapolis is that there was, I think, a change in how they wanted to run offense when it was no longer Anthony Richardson, and it was, whether it was Joe Flacco or Gardner Minshew or then Daniel Jones. So now you're getting some continuity at quarterback. You're getting some continuity at coach. The question that we haven't really seen is, okay, what does Shane look like when he can actually build something year over year, right? There's no reason to believe it will go poorly, but this is a new opportunity, which is also a new challenge for the Colts coaching staff in terms of, are you going to be able to stay on the cutting edge, come up with new ideas? Because even before Daniel got hurt, Daniel was having like weeks 1 through 7, he has like a pressure to sack ratio of like 2. Like he was not going down. And then they played the Titans, and then they played the Steelers, and all of a sudden, the team started to figure out, okay, this is how we're going to get after the guy, and the sacks started to pick back up. So even before the injury, there were signs of like, all right, like you caught the league, but you got the drop on the league. Now the league's going to start catching up. The league always does. How are you going to stay on the cutting edge? And whenever you have a staff that has this much continuity, sometimes the ideas can run stale. So that's the challenge for the Colts.
What is a lesson that teams can take, not from the Seahawks, because it's I think taking lessons from the team that won the Super Bowl is usually kind of like a fool's errand.
Yep.
But from the teams that made the conference championships, so that'd be the Rams, Seahawks, Patriots, Broncos. Is there a lesson that a team can apply this offseason from what made those 4 teams broadly successful?
Probably. It's the same thing to me as drawing a lesson from the Super Bowl champion, which is that you're always going to be filtering things out and forcing some comparisons where they aren't, some similarities where they aren't. The 2 things that stand out to me is, one, all 4 of those teams were really good at defensive tackle. And some teams had drafted and developed, other teams had traded for, right? The Patriots just went and bought Milton Williams at like a price tag that in March made all of our jaws drop, and then by next January nobody cared because Milton Williams was winning playoff games for him, And so I think that the defensive tackle strength, and Colts fans know with Grover and D-Buck, right? When those 2 guys were playing this year, or Defoe, excuse me, those 2 guys were playing this year, holy smokes, the defensive tackle room was good. Yeah. Buckner was having an unreal season before he got hurt this year. So like, there's the strength of defensive tackle that I would bring up. And then you saw, I think, teams that really quickly turned over their roster year over year. And I think that we're seeing teams get better at bouncing back faster because they're getting smarter in terms of winning on the margins with quarterback contracts, winning on the margins with, undrafted free agents, later round draft picks at specific positions, right? Like the Seahawks just don't have a great pass rushing edge rusher, right? They don't have a elite.
They didn't have a 10 sack guy.
Yeah, exactly, right? It was just, we're going to have guys who are really, really good in terms of run defense. We're going to play them on early downs. We're going to fit the run from too high, and that's going to be able to take away the passing game just structurally for us in early downs. We're going to win against the run on those downs, and then we're going to get to 3rd and long, and then Mike McDonald's going to do the wackiest nonsense you've seen in your life, and we're going to be able to get a pressure for free, right? And that, if you can do that, a lot of teams can, but if you can do that, you just saved $60 million at the edge rusher position relative to what you have to pay if you wanted to have like 2 really good pass rushing guys, And so there's edges, and teams are getting better and better at finding those edges. And so to a degree, I think fans should be reasonably less patient with their teams in terms of rebuilds, right? It's funny, because like usually I'm like, okay, slow down, whatever. But I know these teams are really starting to turn things around fast.
I mean, the Seahawks had that stretch where they didn't have anyone come out of the draft who was an impact player, and all of a sudden they go like bam, 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 these like 3 consecutive drafts.
Yep.
And they're winning a Super Bowl because of it.
The thinness between bad drafting and good drafting, man, like they're a lot closer to one another than you think. And it's the same thing with like the difference between 5 and 12 and 12 and 5. I know it's 7 wins, but it's really a lot closer than you think it is in terms of how these things break. Which is why when it seems like the Colts and it's like, man, Shane Steichen another year, like Daniel Jones, will they be able to do it? Yeah, man, like. Probably not, because it's a really hard league and every team has a very thin chance. And like, you are always fighting an uphill battle, but it's always right there. It really, really is.
Last one to get you out here on. If we're sitting here in February 2027, and the Colts' plan of trying to replicate the success they had over the first 10 games comes to fruition and it works, what is maybe the number one reason why that, and I've asked this question to a couple of people, and they've all said it's Daniel Jones. What's maybe the number one reason why that does not involve Daniel Jones?
Yeah, Jones wouldn't have been my first answer. My first answer would have been the line, would have been JT, right?
Okay,
and
love it,
because so much of the success in the first half of the season was the fact that Taylor is just a freak of nature.
Like
I mean,
the EPA per play on rushes in the first half of the season was higher than most teams' EPA per drop.
He was the only one who had a positive one, right? And it was because he had so many touchdowns and because he had so many explosives. Now, once you trickle from Daniel Jones into the Riley Leonard, Phillip Rivers era, it's just so hard to run the football, such that if you get Daniel Jones back, and let's say you get 2023 Daniel Jones or 2022 Daniel Jones, you don't even get first half of 2025 Daniel Jones, but you get enough of a passing game, right, with Warren and let's say Pierce is back, and like there's enough danger there that you can just keep teams honest and you can run the football. Taylor's got 2024 Saquon Barkley level of talent, where it's like, hey, I run our offense into contention, right? I can score from anywhere on the field, and I also can keep our offense on track. The pairing that you need to have with that is you need to have better defense than the Colts had, and they knew that, and they made an aggressive trade to solve that problem, and then we all kind of know how that story ended, and that's very, very unfortunate. But if you can see an improvement in the defense into 2026, and then you can get Jonathan Taylor back to just where he gets to play on a level playing field running the football, then you don't need Daniel Jones to be like all that he was to start the season. It'd be great. You'd be leading the league in points per drive, setting historic record numbers again, but you don't need all that. You need JT, you need the defense, you need Daniel to keep the offense on schedule.
Great stuff. Benjamin Solak from ESPN. Appreciate the time, man.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
The Colts Show is presented by Microsoft Surface Copilot Plus PC, where every day is game day. Greatness in the NFL starts long before kickoff. It's built in the quiet hours of preparation and the discipline to turn insights into action. The Indianapolis Colts rely on Microsoft Surface Copilot Plus PCs to turn preparation into performance. With real-time AI-powered insights right on the sideline, coaches and players can make smarter, faster decisions when it matters most. From the field to the front office, Microsoft Surface Copilot Plus PCs are transforming how the Indianapolis Colts prepare, strategize, and win. This isn't just about football, it's about unlocking potential wherever the game is played. Hey Colts fans, the Colts Sunday night 7-on-7 series is returning. Boys tackle and dedicated girls flag can train in an open gym format across select Sundays this winter. Presented by Forte Sports Medicine and Orthopedics with support from Gatorade and the Gridiron Foundation. Sign up now at Colts.com/SN7on7.